Hi everyone, Bernard here. I hope you're all staying safe and well, and welcome to the Citizen channel. And today we have episode 4 of the City Book Club. Yeah, where we look at players, managers, a book that's City orientated. It might be a player who didn't play all his career at City, but obviously there's always a City element to it. And I think the one we're going to do today is, I don't think there's any doubt about his sort of allegiance and his staying at City. A fantastic, a legend, of course. And we're going to look at Colin Bell, of course, today. Colin Bell, the book, The Reluctant Hero, of course, the autobiography of a Manchester City and England legend, with Ian Cheeseman, good old Ian Cheeseman. I think it was first published in 2005, so 16 years ago. I'm feeling very old. I mean, of course, Colin was at City between 65 and 78 as a player. Obviously, he came back, didn't he, as an ambassador before he sadly passed away. Made 498 appearances, according to one of the City stat books there, with 3 sub-appearances, and scored 153 goals. And today we're going to have a look at a little excerpt, a little chapter, a very, very crucial, important chapter, obviously, which changed his football career. We're going to look at chapter 13, unlucky for some, it certainly was. I don't know if that was meant, I'm not too sure, but how appropriate, really, or unappropriate in a bad way, of course. Chapter 13 is entitled simply, Just When It Was Going So Well. So we're going to have a look back at that today. Please, if you're new to the channel, push that subscribe button, push the bell notifications. All these little vlogs are coming out. I do history stuff, new stuff on City, quizzes, magazine vlogs, these book clubs, of course, and lots of things. So if you or any other City fans, please point me in my direction. I'll be very grateful. And also you'll see some film and TV stuff as well. I do a little reviews on movies and TV drama, and of course information vlogs on DVDs and what's out of the cinema, stuff like that. So if that's of any interest to you as well, please have a look at that if you get the opportunity. But we're talking football today. So we're talking Manchester City, and we're talking Colin Bell and autobiographies. So please, I do post loads of stuff on Facebook and Twitter, so check my links on there as well. If you do follow or friend me, I will check every 2 or 3 days and follow and friend everyone back on there. It's much appreciated. And all your comments on Colin Bell, your memories of this particular things that happened in this chapter or this season. Obviously, it covers a bit of a season. Obviously, this just let me know. Very, very strong memories for me, and I'll interject as and when with little bits that might be of interest to you that my personal memories. So please join me. Any thumbs up are great. If you can't give us a comment today, please just give us a thumb up. But yeah. So here we go. Chapter 13. Just when it was going so well. He started the chapter looking forward to the 1975-76 season. Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, that was when I was going to a lot of away games. Obviously going to all the home games as I had done for many years. But I was sort of just started work that season. I'd started work literally after the season started. I started work in the September, so I was finding a bit of extra cash as well as being a working man at that stage at the age of 16. Obviously, I'd only just turned 16 at that stage. And I think, like all of us, he was optimistic for the season. I think every fan, as fans we were, definitely. And of course, City were one of the big clubs in England. There's no doubt about that. Don't believe any rubbish you hear that in the 70s. Yeah, I mean, City were definitely one of the biggest. They were massive, let's be honest about it. City were a massive club in those days, as we are again now. Bell was 29. He considered himself playing as well as at any other time in his career, and that was echoed by Tony Buck as well, who actually commented. There'll be something on Tony Buck later, a little comment he made. And he still considered he had another 5 or 6 years ahead of him, which sounds about right, doesn't it? That's at that stage in the 70s. And for England as well, he'd fully relaxed. He obviously joined or was in awe of England when he first started after the 66 World Cup in 1970. But he settled into that now in the mid-70s. And he was playing quite relaxed playing for England now, and considered himself obviously a big part of that setup as well. During this season, obviously Dave Watson had joined Marsh, had joined Joe Royle, Hartford, Stewart. So what a team! What didn't we have to feel optimistic about? But again, it was sort of he did comment on this, Colin Bell. It was the poorish away form that affected us, and it did that a lot in the 70s. We didn't quite hit the straps when we were away from home, and Colin Bell sort of remarks on that in this autobiography, and that sort of stopped us really dominating in those mid-70s when I personally, you've watched any of my blogs, I think we should have done a lot better than we actually did in those seasons. But there was a lot of good teams about, and I say it was just that ability or lack of ability to win as many away games as perhaps we would have hoped. United were back, of course. He was looking forward to the United derby. They'd spent the season in the second division. They were now back, obviously, in the first division, and he looked forward to the first derby at Main Road, which was in September, which ended up as a 2-2 draw. So that was a bit disappointing. I think there's an own goal included in that as well, where a certain United player got sort of pressured into putting through his own goal. But yeah, a little bit disappointed. But unexpectedly, we were going to draw United again in the League Cup fourth round, and that would take place on November the 12th. And of course, this would be another 4-goal match, but obviously, a bit more positive for City this time, but Bell remembers also he'd played his 48th game for England in Bratislava against Czechoslovakia just a fortnight before this game. And although we'd lost 2-1, he certainly had no idea at that stage that would be his 48th and final cap for England, wasn't he? I mean, who knows how many caps he would have got if things turned out a bit better. Before the visit of United in the League Cup, Bell had scored. I was at this game. Both in a home win against Birmingham City, and he comments in the book that it felt so easy for him, and as he pinged balls across to Chewett on one flank and Peter Barnes on the other flank, and as well as scoring his goal. So it was just something felt right, didn't it? But yeah, we now sort of go across to Colin Bell and Ian Cheeseman's book now to talk about a little excerpt now from this chapter about the game that would change his career. Naturally, having played well in the game 4 days earlier, I couldn't wait to play United. If we won the game as I felt sure we would be through to the quarter-finals. Everything seemed to be going better than I could have wished. Wednesday the 12th of November 75 was the date of that League Cup derby against United. It was to be a date I would never forget. We were determined to beat them as we knew we should. We had been victorious when we'd played them in the league game. We should have been victorious when we'd played them in the league game at Monfield. Their confidence returned after a year in Division 2, but we believed it would be our day. I always enjoyed playing under floodlights, so there was a tremendous atmosphere as we ran out and prepared to get underway. Within a minute we were ahead, Dennis Chewett scoring the goal. United were rattled as we pressed forward for a second goal. I received a pass through the centre circle from Dennis. I was in the old-fashioned inside right positions as I made my way towards United's goal at the Platt-Lane end of the ground. I'd run about 10 or 15 yards into space as things opened up for me because the United players had been drawn towards Dennis. I had a bit of space in front of me. I was preparing to shoot. Paddy Roach was in goal and the pitch was a bit bobbly, as many surfaces were at that time of year. In the back of my mind, I was thinking that I might have a shot, as Paddy wasn't the best of goalkeepers. That's a bit mean, Colin. At that stage, I didn't really feel I had much of a choice apart from having a crack at goal. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a player coming across in front of me, and I decided I had three options. I picked the wrong one. The first option, take a shot if the ball sat up in the right position. The second was to increase my pace and try to get away from the player. The third was to stop, drag the ball back, let him go across me, and then I'd go on clear towards goal. I selected this last one. I dragged it back, which left me balanced on my right leg with all six studs in the ground. I could now see that it was Martin Buchan who was challenging me. His tackle smacked me just below the knee on the right leg, which had my full weight on it. It felt like my leg had been screwed into the ground. My knee bent backwards, bursting blood vessels in the bottom of my thigh and the top of my calf. All the ligaments in my knee were torn. Within seconds, the knee was just a bag of blood. I knew straight away it was a bad injury. It wasn't the pain that bothered me most, as I was being carried off by physio Freddie Griffiths and his assistant Roy Bailey. It was feeling how bad the injury was. I shouted up to Freddie, they frigging hurt me, Fred. Within 30 seconds, my knee had swollen to the size of a football. Very soon, I was in the ambulance on the way to hospital, where I was to stay for several days. My leg was black and blue from the hip joint right down to my ankle. I was quite generally unwell too, not just from the injury, but also the shock to my system. I was told by the doctors that the trauma was similar to that suffered by someone involved in a serious car crash. So there you go, the excerpt from the book there. I mean, my personal memories, I had recently, as I said, started that job in the September, and I'd made the decision, though I've been attending, obviously, as I said, most home and away games, to give this night game a miss. I actually wasn't there that night. I'd gone to the home game against Birmingham, where Bell had scored a couple of goals the previous week, and I was also going to watch City at Goodison Park the week after, the Saturday after, so I had that planned to go there with my best mate Chris. But so money was a little tight, so I decided obviously this was the sort of game I would be willing to miss. It's a derby game, but it was a League Cup, so I perhaps wasn't as perhaps interested perhaps as I should have been. But as I say, I had to prioritise even in those days as a young man who's obviously earning a small wage. So yeah, it was interesting though, because my mess memory was that night. It was my best friend Chris that I've just mentioned. He turned up at my house unexpectedly after the game. I didn't expect him to come. He'd actually bought me a programme for the game. That's the programme there. I thought he was going to give me a weekend when I saw him before we went to the Everton game. But he came in, and he knocked on I sort of opened the door to him, and he just looked so depressed. And I sort of looked at him and said, what's wrong? You know, I mean, we just beat United 4-0. And he told me all I needed to know, actually just by his face. And then obviously he commented about Colin Bell. And he said, obviously, for people there, perhaps it did look as bad as Colin Bell intimated in that section of his book. And he probably knew, and most City fans probably knew just how bad that injury was that night. So that's my abiding memory. As I said, even though I didn't get to the match, that was just my mate turning up to being so depressed after a 4-0 win against United. Bell goes on to reflect, of course, as perhaps Paul Lake did some years later, about the surgical techniques weren't as good then as they were now. And they actually immobilised his leg after, which was possibly not the way to go, or would be considered the thing to do now. And he perhaps needed to be bending that leg more. And when it was put in plaster and the plaster was removed, he couldn't even bend his knee. And it was like, he said, it was like super glue. His joints were actually stuck in his knee. And he did go on, and I'll go back to his book again, to talk about Martin Buchan, who actually instigated the tackle. He went on to say, I don't blame Martin Buchan for the injury. I knew that there are players in the game who set out to kick you and injure you if they can, but I don't think he was that type of player. I was a little disappointed, though, that he didn't visit me during my time in hospital. If it had been me or I'd done that to him, I'd have gone to see him. As long as I know in my own mind that I hadn't done it on purpose. He didn't come to see me, and only he can tell you what was going on in his mind at the time. I've always maintained the challenge was an accident, but he's never apologised to me. Ian Cheeseman, who's worked with me on this book, rang Martin Buchan to ask for his version of events, and I'm told he didn't want to make any comment. However, he did tell Ian, I have never had any problems sleeping at night over that tackle. The injury was caused by the fact that his studs were in the ground at the time of impact. The referee never even stopped the game, so the tackle couldn't have been that bad. Martin's comments don't change my views, and as far as I'm concerned, there are more important things to worry about. So, yeah, that was obviously Martin Buchan at the time. Obviously, that was back in 2005. I'm not too sure whether everything's been said on it since, but Colin Bell obviously was willing to let it drop. Tony Buchan, the programme notes from the home game versus Spurs on the 22nd of November, was also optimistic. This is what I was talking about early on. He says in those notes, this is the Spurs game, say a couple of weeks after the 22nd November, so 10 days after this obviously United game. He goes on to say in his notes, the loss of Colin Bell has been a serious blow, but we are fortunate in knowing that the expert medical attention he received right from the moment when he went down injured means that this absence from the team may not be as long as at first feared. I think Colin Bell had an idea it might be. He will be back in December, optimistic, and I hope it will be in the early part of the month. The mishap was unfortunate for the club and for Colin. He had come through a period where things had not been going right for him, although he always sustained his effort throughout matches where his form was not at his best. So even though he's actually looked as though he was back on form, Tony Buchan sort of noted that he'd come through a bit of a period, and he's actually said that he went on to say, Tony, but the first signs of the real Colin Bell were there to witness in the home game against Birmingham. So he echoes what Colin said himself, where he netted twice, and I sensed that we were to see another exceptional display against United. It was possible to feel the vibrations from players about to have great games, and Colin was really giving off those kind of feelings as we prepared for the League Cup tie. When Colin plays well, the whole City team plays well. That's a proven fact. We will be relieved to have him back. So as I said, he's echoing more of what Colin Bell said himself. He's sort of just something had clicked, and he just seemed to be all was sort of well in the game, wasn't it? Well in his life at that stage. Yeah, back to the book. I mean, he also reminisced about other injuries in competitive derby games. He'd been in a plaster, but only for a couple of weeks after a game in March 1968 at Old Trafford in a 3-1 win, where a player that I don't particularly remember, Francis Burns, had brought him down in the penalty area from behind, and of course Franny Lee had popped up and scored the penalty, as was what he used to do. The positives for Colin, he did pick for positives in this while he was at home, was he got to spend time, of course, with his family whilst he did rest at home, and his wife, Marie, looked after him. And Dawn, his daughter, would sit on his knee apparently for hours watching TV. He probably did a little bit of exercise while he sort of, I can just imagine him sort of moving. I think I saw an image of KDB doing it a couple of seasons ago with his young one sort of manoeuvring his knee and the child laughing. So I could just imagine that. Within a few weeks, he was walking, attempting to run again, despite the constant pain. He was in constant pain all the time. He just wanted to play. Of course, he did. On Saturday, the 17th of January, so a little bit later than Tony Booker said. He'd said December, hadn't he? On Saturday, the 17th of January, 76, he played a reserve game alongside another legend recovering from a bad injury. That was Glyn Pardoe at the same time. But he knew it wasn't right during the game, and he just couldn't do what he wanted to do. And he literally went to Tony Buck, the skipper, Tony Buck, and asked him, or Skip as we know him, of course, Tony Buck, not to play him again for a while, to not put that on him. Of course, there were still hopes. Tony Buck commented as well of him turning out in the League Cup final against Newcastle, but these faded. And of course, Colin Bell did sort of feel out of it because he wasn't part of it. But yeah, on the homecoming at Manchester Town Hall, he was forced to come out onto the balcony because the City fans were singing his name at the winners' parade the next day. So they wouldn't stop until he actually came out onto the balcony. So even though he wasn't actually part of that, obviously the fans still made him feel part of the team. Dave Watson apparently and Joe Corrigan were regular visitors to his house. Even Joe Corrigan would even carry him down the stairs. I mean, you can imagine, obviously with a bad knee, going up and downstairs. I assume it's harder to go down, isn't it? It's with that sort of thing. So apparently Joe Corrigan would actually carry him down the stairs. He's a big lad, Joe, good lad, one of my favourites. He did continue to attempt comebacks. Almost 2,000 fans turned up to the first home reserve match he played. He played a couple of away games against Leeds on the 10th of March 1976, and he said he just so grateful for that support. Obviously the crowd was far bigger than it would normally have been. He would actually make a first team comeback that season, and again for the last time, and just to finish this book off, we'll go back over to Colin and Ian as he talks about this. After 2 more reserve games, I made my first team comeback in a home match against Derby County at Main Road on the 10th of April 1976. That's the programme there. I hadn't played at the top level for 6 months. I was at this one as well, game. I hadn't played for 6 months. I was relieved that I could finally put all the frustration behind me. The crowd that day was over 42,000, nearly 10,000 more than normal. And again, I was told that many of the extra supporters had come to the game just to see my return. Things seemed to go quite well. I wasn't as mobile as I had been before the injury, but I felt confident I would get stronger. It was an eventful match to be involved in with 7 goals. We won 4-3. Great game. The following day, I could feel a reaction to my knee, so I quickly realised I had to miss the midweek trip to Newcastle. But I returned the following Saturday at Leeds. I scored our consolation goal in a 2-1 defeat from the edge of the box. I was at that one as well. I was encouraged by the football I'd played, and I remain optimistic that with a few months to work more on the strength of my knee and my overall fitness, I'll be back to my best by the start of the following season. Before that, there were 3 more games to go, starting with a visit to Liverpool, which proved a big disappointment. We lost 3-0, no surprise there. Bucky asked me to play at right back in the next game, a home match against Arsenal. The idea was to get me involved in some tackling, which Tony thought would build up my confidence in the strength of my knee. Among the players I faced that day were Liam Brady, Trevor Ross and Alex Cropley. As we defended the North Stand, I was playing in front of the dugouts and Ross tried to go past me. I challenged him just as I would have done at my peak level of fitness. And as the tackle was completed, I felt something pop out of the side of my knee. I knew instinctively that this was not good. It was another major setback, and I didn't play in the last game of the season at Old Trafford. Little did I know how significant this second injury to the knee would prove to be. In hindsight, I know I came back too early, and perhaps if I'd waited until the following season, I might have built up enough strength in my knee to have prevented further harm to the joint. Yeah, obviously we all remember the comeback with the Newcastle game, and obviously that was his initial comeback, wasn't it? A little bit too soon afterwards. So there you go. Colin Bell, Reluctant Hero. Hope you enjoyed that. Anyway, just a little piece from little excerpts from his famous. But if you can get hold of that book, I did manage to get a good deal on this one. I do remember when Colin Bell sadly passed. I mean, you were talking £30-40 these books are going for, but certainly well worth having if you haven't already got this book, and I'm sure not a lot of you City fans have got that anyway. But thanks for joining me for this City Book Club episode 4. Colin Bell, Reluctant Hero, the autobiography of a Manchester City and England legend, and my personal legend, as you probably know if you watched any of my vlogs, with Ian Cheeseman. First published 2005. Of course, no doubt we'll be delving back into that book many times in the future, as we are most of these books that I do. Please check out, as I have done, this is my 4th episode now. Episode 1 featured Mike Doyle, Manchester City, my team. Episode 2 featured Joe Mercer, Football with a Smile, with Gary James involved in that as well. And episode 3 featured Dennis Stewart, My Football Journey. And of course, now this episode 4 with Colin Bell. And there's loads more to come. It just gets better and better with our wonderful historic club, Manchester City. Anyway, thanks for joining me. We're going to do the rest of the day. Have a great one. Look after yourselves, look after your friends, look after your families. More importantly, let's all look after each other. Till we meet here again on the Citizen channel, or perhaps have a look at my film and TV channel. Whatever it is, all I ever ask you to do, just a simple thing. Stay safe, Blues. Come on, City. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.